I'm going to go out on a limb here, way out on a limb. I'm going to predict the future. I'm going to prognosticate. Now, I'm going to have too much fun doing this as well. Because I just think this is hilarious. This whole thing is hilarious. You'll understand hopefully in a bit. I'm watching what's happening on the news. I'm watching the news. A lot of them are saying that people can read the writing on the wall. I've been thinking a lot about the book of Daniel lately, the Bible book of Daniel, where King Belshazzar or Belshazzar, however you want to pronounce it, is having a feast with all of his grandees in Babylon, and writing, a hand appears and writes on the wall. And of course, they can't read the writing, so they bring in Daniel to interpret the writing. And among the things he says is, you have been weighed in the balance and found insufficient. So basically, this day is your last, and Babylon was defeated that night. I don't know how true any of that is. Sometimes I think a lot of it is just really good educational myth. But anyways, I'm watching what's happening, and I kind of sense I know what's going to happen. The writing is on the wall. There's a line in a movie, Another Country, and one of the characters, he's talking about the people in 1939, I think it was, and he said, well, people were just waiting to see which way to jump. And that's kind of how I feel about what's going on right now in Washington, that they're sitting it out just until they know which way to jump. And I know I'm going to piss some people off doing this, and I can name them. I can name them, but I won't. I did it back in 2012. What happened in 2012? Just to digress a little bit. I have a website, and I have a blog on my website, and every Wednesday and Sunday, I write my blog, and I've been doing it since 2010. Anyways, I mentioned in 2012 that I didn't see that the Republicans were bringing out a strong candidate to race against Obama for the election. And he was campaigning for his second term, of course. And I wondered if maybe the Republicans just assumed it was a foregone conclusion that he was going to win, so why waste a good candidate? Just throw out anybody, someone under the bus, and then save the blue chippers for 2016, which they did. All 17 of them. Anyways, that's bad. It's bad. So, I shouldn't have said that. Anyways, I pissed somebody off because he read my blog and he wrote to me. Someone from, I want to say he was from South Carolina or North Carolina, described himself as being a conservative Christian Republican, and I couldn't be more wrong. I couldn't be more wrong. There was absolutely no way that Obama would be elected to a second term. Don't delude yourself, Dennis. You are 100% wrong. And I just wrote back and I said, well, I can't predict the future. All we can do is just wait and see what happens. Well, we know what happened, and he never wrote to me again. So, I just think it's funny. I just think it's funny. The whole thing. People take it so seriously. But it depends upon where you get your information from. If you get your information only from Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh, you're going to have one point of view. If you get your information only from MSNBC, you're going to have a different point of view. And as somebody said in one of the comments, I think my last video was, get your news from a lot of different sources. Look at the BBC, France 24, DW Journal, that comes out of Berlin. Read the New York Times, read The Nation, read as many different sources as you can, and read books. Read the books. Find out what in depth you can learn. Anyways, getting back to my prognostication, I wrote up some predictions for myself, and I hope I'm wrong. But to me, the writing is on the wall. I think we know what's going to happen. And so I thought I would have fun with this and just talk about what I see as far as my predictions for the future. Prediction number one. Mueller will release his findings probably, I'm going to guess, late summer, early fall, hopefully by October, because why not? Comey reopened the email issue with Hillary Clinton's email. Was it 8 days before the voting began? And we know what the outcome was. So, anyways, what will Mueller find? What will he, when he releases his findings after the investigation is over, after they've interviewed the last of their suspects, and then they've had time to just filter it all down into a concise 1,476 page document, they will release their findings. What's he going to find? Well, I think the most obvious one is obstruction of justice, right? Trump fired Director James Comey. Trump tried to fire special counsel. We learned just yesterday, tried to fire special counsel Robert Mueller. He gave the word. And then what happened? White House counsel, what was his name? Douglas McCann refused and said he would quit first before he would let that take place. And it was an interesting comment that was made on the news late yesterday. They said that as far as they had four people told the New York Times about this attempt, this giving the word to fire Mueller. But nobody, it was all anonymous. Nobody gave their name, or the names weren't published. And one of the commentators suggested on TV, maybe one of the four was this Doug McCann. Maybe he knew that Trump was serious about doing this, attempting it again, and by getting the word out, getting it leaked, hopefully that would stop Trump. Pure speculation. I have no proof of that, but it's an interesting thought. I mean, if you like conspiracy theories, there's a good conspiracy theory for you. Okay, speaking of conspiracies, again on the news today, they were saying collusion with the Russians, not an issue, because collusion is not a crime. However, conspiracy is. Conspiracy to rig the outcome of the election, the 2016 election, a U.S. election, trying to rig that. That's against the law, the conspiracy, and asking for the Russian to help with that. I mean, the meeting where they discussed adoption in Trump Tower, you know about that. Jared Kushner, I think, was one of the ones in the room. It wasn't collusion, but it may have been conspiracy to rig an election. That could be one of the crimes that Mueller says happened. Third, they're talking more and more about this. I heard more today, more about this money laundering, because there's a lot of peripheral stuff that points to this. For one, Trump won't say anything bad about Putin, won't say anything bad about the Russians. Well, we know the Trump family has borrowed a lot of money from the Russians. Trump family has been over in Moscow. We don't know what happened over there. We don't know what was said over there. We don't know what arrangements were made, what deals were made. It's common knowledge that the oligarchy, the Russian oligarchy, uses foreign banks like Deutsche Bank, and there's a bank in Greece that they used to channel money into the United States to buy real estate that they then sell and bring the money back to Russia. It's cleaned now, it's laundered, because it's just profit from selling real estate rather than where the money originally came from. And it was, who was his name? Preet Bharara. He was the New York federal prosecutor. He was fired by Trump. He said at one point he was investigating money laundering in New York. And his area was the Southern District of New York, which includes Trump Tower. He may have been getting too close, and that may have been why he was fired. So money laundering might be one of the issues. Again, they're talking more and more about it. I'm going to project a fourth one that they haven't mentioned, but this became obvious, or possible, maybe not obvious, possible, yesterday when Trump said he would gladly speak to the FBI, answer questions under oath, which is moot. You don't answer questions to the FBI under oath because you're automatically under oath. If you're being investigated and questioned by the FBI, it doesn't matter whether you take an oath or not. It's against the law to lie to the FBI. That's where, who were they? Michael Flynn and George Papadopoulos went wrong. And they eventually admitted guilt. They guilty as charged that they had lied to the FBI. It doesn't matter whether they were under oath or not. Well, if Trump, I mean, you've seen Trump's record. He has his own sense of reality. That if he says something is true, it's got to be true because he's Trump. He's the president. Nobody is better than him. Nobody is smarter than him. He's a genius sort of guy. I almost said that with a straight face. But he has his own alternate facts, his own alternate reality, if you will. And if he says something is true, it's got to be true. But if he goes into an interview before an FBI panel with Mueller sitting in the back taking notes, if he's going to answer questions or respond in writing to some of these questions, that may be a part of it where he can submit some of his answers in writing. Do you really think Trump is the kind of guy who's going to be upfront and honest and transparent about answering every single question as truthfully as he possibly can? Or will he dodge? Will he obfuscate? Will he do everything he can to not tell the truth? Or will he just plain outright lie? And if he outright lies, there's your fourth one, lying to the FBI, which puts him in the same jail cell as Michael Flynn and George Papadopoulos. Okay. Those four predictions. Now, where does that take us? Well, I'm going to project that the Republicans are going to be trounced in the midterm election coming up this fall. A lot of people are already dropping out. There's empty seats now because people are leaving, a lot of them, Democrats as well as Republicans, because they've been charged with sexual improprieties in their position, using their power, sending vulgar email, soliciting sex from some of their aides or whatever, their staffers. I think a lot of the seats are going to go to Democrats. Now, if the House of Representatives gets a nice majority of House seats, if the Democrats take control, I can almost guarantee you, if I were a betting man and I had money to waste, just in case I lose it, I would bet strongly that the first order of business of the 2019 Congress, with the Democrats in control of the House of Representatives, the first business of the day is going to be impeach Trump. There's no one that can stop him at that point because they have the majority. So that's one thing that I think is going to happen, especially if Mueller comes out with these 3 or 4 findings, all of which are reasons to indict Trump and his people, his minions, for breaking various laws. In which case, if he's impeached, like Nixon, he would resign and he would complain that the system is rigged against him. He's not resigning because he's weak or because he's guilty. It's because the system is so rigged against him that he just doesn't want to fight them anymore. If he wanted to fight them, if he was young enough to fight them, he would win. You know he would win. Absolutely. No one would win more than Trump would win. I thought of one thing more that I wanted to say, so I did a pickup to cover this. If he is impeached and Trump does leave office, I can almost guarantee you, I shouldn't say this, that what he'll say is that, well, he lasted 2, maybe 3 years in office, but it was a lot longer than crooked Hillary would have lasted. She would have been impeached in the first year. 6 months. 6 months. No, she would have been gone in 3 months. Crooked Hillary. Lock her up. Lock her up. That's bad. Dennis, that's bad. I'm sorry, but I'm just having too much fun doing this. So, and then Pence would exonerate and pardon as many of him and his family members as he possibly can, unless Pence is tied up in it, but I don't think he is. Pence is staying in the wings because I think he knows he's the next president of the United States, whether it's by election in 2020 or by appointment in 2019. Anyways, I think that's what he would do, is just like Gerald Ford did in the Nixon when Nixon resigned. He would just exonerate all these people. They would all get pardoned, as many as he could, and then Trump would just wander off into the sunset and go join Steve Bannon under a rock somewhere. Okay. Meanwhile, if the Senate has a large majority of Democrats taking over the control of the Senate, I predict that at least 2 Supreme Court justices will retire, maybe 3, because they're getting up in age. Like, look at Ruth Bader Ginsburg. How much longer can she serve as a justice on the Supreme Court? I predict that they would retire. Pence would naturally nominate a conservative judge to fill each of those positions that are vacated because of the retirements. And the Democrats would say, no, we'll let the voters decide in 2020. We're not going to even listen. We're not even going to consider any of Pence's nominations. We'll let the voters. Same thing that Mitch McConnell and the Republicans did when, what was his name? Merrick? Page 2. Who was it? Merrick Garland. When Obama, and Merrick Garland wasn't even a well-known liberal. He was actually kind of a middle-of-the-road kind of a guy. Just as they stalled, they refused to even consider Garland to fill the position, the vacant position on the Supreme Court. So I just think that the Democrats, hey, what goes around comes around. They'll just say, no, we'll wait until 2020, and we'll let the voters decide who they want in those positions. And then a liberal Democrat will get elected as president, and he or she will nominate liberals to fill those positions, and then the Supreme Court will be swung liberal for a while. Okay, that's so far. Then, this is my final prediction. Democrats will stand around with their hands in their pockets doing nothing. You'll see a lot of this in 2020. I don't know. They won't do anything because they never do. They can't seem to make up their mind. They're like Hamlet. I don't know. You'll see a lot of that on the steps of the Capitol building. Groups of them on the steps of the Capitol building. I don't know. and the voters will get pissed off, and the pendulum will swing back to the Republicans again, because that's our nation. See, that's what's going on. And that's why people are getting pissed off, and why the elections are starting to go haywire now, because we have a government of politicians who are really in the pocket of the wealthiest Americans, because it costs so much money to run a campaign now that these politicians need that money from wealthy donors, super PACs, big corporations, to fund their campaign. But they're not going to give their money unless they can get something in exchange, right? So a lot of these politicians don't want to do a whole lot unless they know it can satisfy their base and can satisfy the people who gave them the money. So they kind of just stand around. I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see what's going to happen. And it doesn't matter which side of the aisle at this point, because both sides of the aisle, they're in the same predicament. And so government is grinding to a halt. In 50 years, 75 years, I won't live long enough to see it, but I can see this country, unless it can solve its problems, I can see it just being another country in the world, like France, like Spain, like Brazil, Portugal. that it's just Canada, Mexico. It's just going to be another nation. That's all. And we won't be the superpower. We won't be the most economically powerful nation. Already China has eclipsed us as far as having the most powerful economy in the world. I believe China is going to eventually become the next superpower. It'll be the Chinese empire that'll basically take control of the world. And they're not going to police the world for democracy the way the U.S. did. They will use the world to take wealth for themselves. They'll take resources from this country, that country. They'll control countries for the sake of their own wealth. And I think that's where this whole thing is going. I hope I'm wrong. But as I said, the writing just seems to be on the wall, and it's getting harder and harder to think otherwise. Just these are the things that I see happening, and nothing would please me more if 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, people respond to this video and say, boy, Dennis, you couldn't have gotten it more wrong. You were so wrong. I'd be perfectly happy with that because I would like to see a better outcome. I'm not a pessimist by nature, but the writing is on the wall, and it's not saying, hey, guys, go for it. You're doing great. So, okay, so there's my vlog for today. Hopefully I haven't offended too many of you. Again, I can name the ones who are going to be offended, and I'm going to hear from you. And if it makes you feel good to flame me, have fun. I'm not going to care. If you like what you're hearing, please subscribe, tell others about it, and thanks for listening.